Hello, everybody. This is Sean from AVID, American Vets in Defense of Democracy. Welcome to the podcast. I've got a very special guest today that I've been meaning to talk to for a while on a very important issue. This is Søren Knudsen. He is a retired colonel in the Danish Army and the current deputy president of the Danish Veterans Association. He served two tours in Afghanistan alongside U.S. forces in addition to other missions. For his distinguished service in Afghanistan, the U.S. government awarded him the U.S. Bronze Star. Following President Trump's attempt to annex Greenland, he became a prominent voice for Danish veterans who felt a deep sense of pain, betrayal, and sadness over threats to seize the territory, describing it as an offense to those who sacrificed their lives for the U.S.-Danish alliance. So I'm really excited to have Søren on with us today. Søren, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on today and taking the time to talk with us on this important issue.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure being with you, and thank you for your services and what you are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I wanted to start off with a little bit of background for people who haven't. There have been you led protests, and there's a lot of interesting aspects to the story, but just some basic background. So you served in Afghanistan and Iraq, fighting alongside American forces. What time frame was that, by the way?
Yeah, I was there in 2006 in the which was a Canadian-led headquarters in Afghanistan in Kandahar. In 2006, we took over in the Enduring Freedom Mission, which then became NATO's Regional Command South. So that was it was my first combat tour in Afghanistan, and second time I was the deputy commander of the NATO Rule of Law Field Support Mission, which was essentially 99% an American mission. We
Mm,
had a European, a Danish deputy commander, a Dutch chief of staff, and two Polish staff officers. That was all. The rest entirely American, which was called Rule of Law Field Force Afghanistan.
okay. And can you describe the relationship between Danish forces and American forces at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to say that we learned from the Americans. We we admired their efficiency, we admired their equipment, we admired their what is now in fancy terms called C4I, communications, control systems, and what they brought, all the technology and the way that they were able to actually employ that. But we were also, on the other hand, amazed by the sacrifice that we saw the Americans and our colleagues, the sacrifice that they were making for their country, for America, post the 9/11. So it was a feeling which was both admiration, and it was also a feeling that, hey, we are backing up what our nations want us to do. We want to support America because America was attacked. The only time that the NATO Article 5 was actually pulled out and put on the table was post 9/11. So we felt we were there together. We felt that we were out there fighting for values. We were out there together. So it was a mix of admiration, a mix of professional admiration, but also personal admiration. A really good relation between the Danes and the Americans. And I want to say that on a higher level, let's say political level, and even historical level, Denmark and the United States has always had brilliant relations. Even in the darkest hours, and the Danes have been very supportive to the United States.
Going back, would you say going back to World War II? I mean, Cold
Going back to
War.
World War, I mean, I was born in 1960.
Mm-hmm.
The tractors came from the Marshall Help. I joined the
Mm-hmm.
army in 1979. The Danish army looked an episode of MASH, but it was almost all of it American equipment
Right.
that that was offered to us in dire times in the 1950s. And in so many ways, the United States had offered to us a lot of support in rebuilding Europe, in rebuilding this country after the Second World War, and historically had shown an interest in building good relations with Europe, with Denmark, and I mean that continued until very recently.
Yeah, I can only imagine at that time the tenor or the
Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
tone of just it must have been just 100% different than what we're
I mean,
seeing.
if I'm not wrong, in America, you talk about this, the city on the hill.
Yeah.
I mean, America was the country on the hill,
Yeah.
and which so when we post 9/11 were sent out there to support America, it was very important to us.
I mean, it wasn't really your fight anyways, but you were still ponied up and I mean, I know that there were some terrorism issues in
Yeah.
Denmark, but you didn't have to send forces out to Afghanistan to you could have just stayed home and dealt with your own problems
I
domestically.
mean, you could say that within the NATO alliance. I mean, I was born in the NATO alliance. I was born 1960. It's from 1949. Within the NATO alliance, you could say the transatlantic link is very much built upon the fact that America has a footstep in Europe and has therefore also provides security to some degree to the Europeans. And on the other hand, you could say that it's expected that the Europeans would help the Americans in their more global ambitions.
Sure.
And that has been a logic. And as a small state, naturally for Denmark, the logic would be if the Americans calls upon us and NATO evokes Article 5, that all would come like the Musketeers and help each other. It was logic to us. It was the reason for going to Afghanistan. The reason to going to Afghanistan, I'm sorry to say, it wasn't really the Afghans. It was the Americans for
Yeah, and the
us.
alliance maybe to keep the alliance strong and robust.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, hence the as I was talking about the pride, that we were proud to go out there and we really saw competent American efforts out there and we really we were amazed by that and we learned a lot about that. We admired that.
Yeah, it worked both ways. I remember in my time, not in the Marine Corps, but when I worked for the government and spent time over in Iraq, same thing. You would work very closely with our European allies, Commonwealth allies. It could be Australia, the English, and a lot of it was just learning about how their militaries work. But there was a lot of cultural exchange going on at the
Yeah.
same time, and you just forged friendships and
Yeah.
I really look that I guess again, that's why I was so dismayed recently when I saw that we had a president that was just really willing to throw all that away, all of that kind of relationship building that we'd built up over the years, more recently with the war on terror. It goes back again generations,
Yeah.
but it was astounding to me.
I think the thing is that the war on terror in a way united us. And what happened
Hmm.
at 9/11 was not, I mean, don't misunderstand me. It was not only to America, it was to all of us. I mean,
Yeah.
by the way, I think any nation on earth kind of lost people in the Twin Towers and so on.
Yeah.
But but I think it was something we all felt that this is something we need to do something for. And when the
Yeah.
Americans called upon us, there was no doubt. There was no doubt in Denmark. There was no doubt in our military. And even when we started taking rather high percent in naturally in percentage of what we sent out there, rather high casualties. I think Denmark was on number two or three and on the list of casualties per capita.
Over was it over 50 in Afghanistan, right? If
Yeah,
I read
yeah,
that
yeah. We
correctly.
lost
Yeah.
44 in Afghanistan and 8 in Iraq. Out
Hmm.
of I mean, we're still a pretty small nation, a small state, but a small military. But that said, in the Danish population, there was not any doubt, and even today, there is not any doubt we did the right thing.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so fast forward, you've come home. I mean, the wars more or less over, never ends for veterans, but you've come home and then now, what was your reaction when you first, I was trying to think back when Trump first started really making these intimations that he was looking at annexing Greenland. It wasn't just 6 months ago. I think he said things like that going back. But anyway, when it first registered for you that this was an issue, what were your feelings?
Well, I mean, the first time was even in his first
His
administration.
first administration,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, as a true real estate developer, he offered to buy Greenland.
Right.
And I want to be honest with you, it's not the first time that anybody has wanted to buy Greenland.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, believe it or not, in 1917, we actually sold a piece of some islands to
Mm.
America, the
Mm-hmm.
so-called, well, by now, American West Indies or America, sorry, not, the American Virgin Islands. The
Mm.
American Virgin Islands were actually Danish, and they were
Mm.
sold in 1917 uh,
Mm-hmm.
for gold, which I
Yeah.
guess is still in Fort Knox. And believe it or not, so it's not that it was. I mean, it's not that it was that surprising that Donald Trump would offer that. It was more like, why does he do it? Why does he do
Yeah.
it? Because we have defense agreement since Second World War. The United States and Denmark have commonly kind of had defense agreements.
And Denmark has offered anything the US had asked for during the Cold War, basically for basing
Yeah,
rights or
yeah.
with no problem.
1951, Greenland got its self-determination law in 2009 and self-ruling and in 2009 and subsequent went also came into these agreements. So we have a tripartite agreement in which the United States can essentially ask for whatever it wants. And
Yeah.
historically, and in all terms, I'm sure that the Greenlanders and the Danish, I can't speak entirely for the Greenlanders, but I'm pretty sure that unless extreme demands, the United States would get what it wanted.
Yeah. The
I
the
mean,
the the big narrative that really they were using over here when they were really pushing hard was, and you could see this in a lot of the right-wing media, was that, well, Russia and China is going to steal it. If we don't steal it first, then
yeah.
Russia and China are going to take, which was nonsense. I mean, there's no way that the America, in conjunction with the Europeans, NATO, couldn't protect Greenland. It doesn't make any sense. But that really seemed to resonate with people who thought it was a good idea
I
to
mean,
annex Greenland.
if you would be worried about some Arctic territory, which would eventually be let's say that the Chinese or the Russians would take, I would be more concerned about big parts of Alaska. It's much closer to Russia. The Russians have a much higher Arctic capacity in all kinds than the United States has. And I mean the distance is what, 40 kilometers across the Bering Strait. So I would be much more concerned if it was a purely and entirely only military assessment of the risks and the dangers in Greenland. Um, I mean, they have claimed that Chinese ships are sailing around Russian submarines all over the place and whatever. It's just not true.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
agreed.
sorry.
That was just used to kind of whip up, I don't know, an excuse and
Yeah.
popular support for something they were trying to, for actually, you know, yeah, I don't know how close they really came to mounting a military kind of effort. I don't know what your take on this was. It seemed to be more of like um, a propaganda push or, a messaging trying to like set the stage to maybe try and purchase Greenland, but I know that the Europeans took it very serious, correct?
I mean, if you look upon it like that, you could say post Venezuela, um,
Hmm.
the the Europeans saw that the Americans have an incredible capacity. I mean, if you look upon it entirely, in my case as a retired officer of the army, what they did in Venezuela was an incredible operation.
Mm.
It was short, it was sharp, it had an exit scenario, and it was made with no casualties.
Right.
Brilliant. And by the way, the objective was clear: get that guy out of the country and get him in front of a court in America. Well done. Super. So I guess that the Danes had seen that and were could be said to be slightly worried that a Donald Trump would try to do something like that in Greenland. I can't tell you the exact level of that concern, but I can say that post the events, we know that they were actually the Danish government with the European number of European major actors uh, were actually planning and executing crisis management in good old terms, including negotiations on the one hand, which was taking place in Washington, and on the other hand, actually a military buildup in Greenland. We know by now that the Danes actually sent explosives, various kinds of munitions and blood supplies and other things to Greenland. So there was some kind of a concern.
Yeah.
And
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just about to say that, and for sure, in my point of view, the reason why then Donald Trump pretty quickly came out and said there is no military, it's not a military option in Greenland. I think it was because uh, he realized this would be an attack on a on an ally. It would be an attack on a NATO country, and not least, in case casualties, it would be difficult to explain to the American populace, to the American population and the American voters, to sacrifice soldiers on Greenland, where they can get what they want anyway.
Right. So that took place, that turning point took place, as I understand it, was during the World Economic Forum
Yes.
In Geneva, correct?
Yeah.
So do you think there were some
It's
key
in Davos in Switzerland. Yes.
in Switzerland, so do you think there were some key European officials who got him in a room and just said, look, this we like kind of leveled with President Trump and said, we're going to fight if necessary, or this is not going to go down easily if you try and use force to annex Greenland. And you think that was enough? That's what really made him change his mind?
I think that was a part of it, and I think the political consequences. I mean, there are a few sensible people in that administration, after all, and
Can
and
you name
and
can you name one?
yeah, I'll leave that to you.
Okay. Yeah, there must be, but yeah.
Somewhere.
The other theory I heard, the other thing I read is that the markets, the financial markets were
Yeah.
starting
Yes.
to have an effect. And then whenever that happens, then so Trump
I-
has a tendency to go all the way up to the until he hits a wall of
yes. Exactly.
he will push until, and then once he hits
Yes.
that wall, then he does the what we call taco or whatever. He'll back
Yeah.
down. But until he hits that, and several times with his tariffs and what some of what I read on the Greenland issue is that the U.S. bond market was starting to panic and things of that nature. That that it hadn't been very well thought out how this would affect the financial markets either.
I mean, there could be many explications, but I think this might be certainly one of them. I mean, one thing is that you attack in Venezuela. I would just say one thing, you attack in Iran. One thing is that you threaten Cuba and whatever. But these are not 80 years of alliance partners.
Right. That's what
And
makes Greenland absolutely what makes Greenland
yes,
different.
um, I have spoken and written a little bit here and there about what I called the European do or die moment.
Mm,
That is the moment where they will have to say enough is enough. If they don't, they will, and understand me right, die as the Europe as it is now in value of in defense of values, and 32 nations working together in different fora and different ways. You could say feeling that we still have a different role in the world than Chinese, Russians, other bigger nations. And that the Europeans would have to stand up at a certain time and say enough is enough. And I think part of that do or die moment was Greenland to say, no, we're not going to allow this. This is
I
European. This is
yeah,
geography. It's North American, but in political sense, it's Europe.
yeah, a lot of what I've read recently is that you're correct, and it's Greenland, but it's also moving on from Greenland into the Iran, all of the disparaging things that Trump has said about NATO during this conflict. I've heard a lot of European writers and opinions saying this is it. We've got to do something, do more to kind of become more self-sufficient in our defense, and this
Yeah.
is the moment. Yeah, so maybe it's a
And and
move.
and I think I think this do or die moment started in Greenland. And I
Hmm.
think Iran, this whole thing that you start a war and then you get a little bit in trouble and then you say NATO didn't come help us. That was more like
Which
first times NATO heard about this. Uh,
oh, and
and
oh, by the way, NATO's a defensive alliance, so it doesn't really make
yeah,
sense for NATO
yeah,
to.
and North Atlantic Treaty
I
Organization. And
know.
I mean, you could continue like that. It's an American Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers. Europe is an American commander.
Mm,
NATO plans defense of the North Atlantic European area, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Long story, but but I think that what I was trying to say here is that we are approaching a moment, and it might come from Washington or it might come from Europe, where enough is enough.
right.
And that is very, and I repeat, very, very regrettable because it could be the end of Europe as it is now, which I believe is pretty stable and pretty healthy in many ways.
Mm,
Um, or it could be the end of the NATO alliance. And the NATO alliance is an advantage to the United States, and it's an advantage to Europe. It has been for 80 years.
mm,
Nothing has changed in 1 year's time. That has changed 80 years of assessments by Democrat presidents, Republican presidents, independent. I don't know if there have been any independent presidents, but presidents of all observations from the right of the Republicans to the left of the Democrats. They have all supported America's alliances, and they have all supported NATO, and they have all accepted that this transatlantic link, as I was talking about, the US gets something from the Europeans in order, and because the Americans have supported Europe, Europe has supported America. But in Iran, you could say they actually said no.
yeah.
So it's part of this moment where things are moving in a very, very wrong direction. And you know what? Who is really smiling and laughing right now? It's Mr. Putin, and
Yeah.
it's Mr. Xi in Beijing.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to
100%.
say so, but I think a lot of people are smiling even in Tehran.
Yeah, well, of course, because now they control the Strait of Hormuz, which
Yeah.
is, and I don't see any prospects as we are currently that anything's going to change there. We'll see, but yeah, Iran also stands to win by all this, and this really gets to like taking us back to a world, all of the, and you understand this, all of the institutions that were built up after the Second World War, the liberal international order and the multilateral institutions such as NATO that supported
Yeah.
the world that we lived in. The Trump administration is basically tearing these things down right in front of our eyes. So, and you can see it in this war in Iran, where war against Iran, I should say, where it's a unilateral war that Trump decided on. He didn't consult his allies, he didn't consult the American people, and look what the end result is. I think we're going to be dealing with this for several years to come.
We'll see. I mean, today but absolutely we'll see what happens in Iran, and we can guess forth and back. But to me, the real concern is that we're seeing a split in the part of the world that, at least nominally and in several occasions, were fighting for the values that you were just saying, the multilateralism, the anti-authoritarian, the democracy in the broadest sense of that word. Uh, and and that gives space to the guys like Putin, like Xi, in various ways. I mean, I won't say that the Chinese are like the Russians, and the Russians are not like the North Koreans, and the North Koreans are not like the Iranians, and so on and so on. But these authoritarian in various ways are smiling right now.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Um, I just wanted to get kind of like turn back to Greenland for just a few more minutes. Just to wrap up, we went to this period where it seems like Trump backed down on his ultimate, you know, threat to annex Greenland. What do you see now? I mean, so now it seems like from what I've read and the analysis that I've seen is that things have kind of shifted to a diplomatic track,
Yes.
but the administration still, there's been some statements that have come out. They haven't really changed. They haven't really backed away from their ultimate goal of wanting to annex Greenland. Is that your assessment as well?
Yeah, I mean, there is little doubt in what has been stated from President Trump that he wants Greenland. I mean, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
There are various interpretations that Rubio may be a little less hawkish than Stephen Miller, and Stephen Miller being a little more hawkish than JD Vance, and so on and so on and forth and back, and that in the administration there might be different ways of seeing this. But I mean, if the boss states late at night on his own social media, "I want Greenland," if I'm not wrong, that was repeated just a few days ago, even
Mm,
amidst what's happening in Iran. So I think right now we have a feeling that, well, they are concerned with other things of good reasons, and therefore there is probably a feeling that, yeah, it's not on the agenda right now and right here on this particular Thursday afternoon, Tuesday afternoon. But it could come back if perceived politically politically giving to the MAGA camp, to the
mm,
administration. Um, and you could say that's how politics plays out in any democracy. So that's not in itself wrong, but from the Kingdom of Denmark, we are obviously concerned with the fact that there are some negotiations. Um, we don't know a lot about those negotiations, but it seems like that the Americans have pointed at some two, three, four areas in Greenland where they would like to essentially establish bases as they had during the Second World War,
mm,
and exercise oh, uh, build things and prepare a defense of these spots, and air bases, and I don't know, air space tools of various kinds. So,
mm,
but it doesn't really seem that they want more than that. But we
mm.
don't know. I mean, by now we can't say, but it seems like that the negotiations are pretty much in on these terms are pretty much peaceful, and could eventually lead to a negotiation result, which I believe we could have had all of the time.
Of course. If you had a different
Yeah,
president in place
yeah.
who's
Now, I I want to say one thing about when talking about NATO, and
hmm
also what President Trump has achieved in that sense. No doubt, the Europeans have since 2014 known that they needed to invest more in defense,
mm,
and they were probably led to say, "Well, we meet in NATO once a year and we say things and we promise things, and then throughout the year we can forget it until we meet next time."
mm,
And so there is no doubt that in that sense, President Trump moved European defense investments. He fast-tracked them. He did something to the European understanding of a need of defense.
Hmm.
Now, whether Trump did it or Putin did it, I don't know, but at least the two together clearly have demonstrated to the Europeans, and especially I'd say in the part of Europe where I am, we are close to Russia. We are our neighboring country, actually neighbor Russia. We have a small Danish island in the Baltic Sea. Next stop is Russia. In my point of view, you could say that the way that President Trump, in his second period of administration, you could say that he has actually achieved something on European understanding of European defense and the need to do something.
Which is brought up here a lot in the States, and
Yeah,
which I agree
yeah,
with. That's
yeah,
fine. I'm all for Europe spending more on defense, especially with what's going on in Ukraine. I just
yeah,
wonder if there was a way, Trump is Trump.
yeah,
He's abrasive, he's crude, and but my whole thing is I wish that we could have done this a little bit more tactfully and diplomatically without insulting our ally.
yes.
It would have, the alliance could have come out a lot stronger if it had been done differently, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
And
So,
and 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 the price that you could say we are paying on both sides of the Atlantic is that our relations are going downhill.
yeah,
And these relations are not only security, it's economics. I mean, it's economics, it's political, and
it's
US
a,
soft power. I mean, the good old term soft power, that how to influence in soft ways, how cultural influence, political influence, economic
yeah,
influence.
that's gone,
It,
right? I wanted to ask you that. I wanted to ask
it,
you about the general mood in Europe toward the United States, just given everything that's happened, if that's what the direction you're moving
yeah.
in here.
I think a majority of the Europeans, a lot of Europeans have relations to America.
Right, we
A
have
lot of
close
Europeans have
ties.
family. I mean,
Hmm.
I told you I'm married to an American, but
Hmm.
God bless her. And there are so many positive links, and there is so much good history, and there is so much, let's say, the narrative of America as it was is really good.
And we share such a common history, an
We share
enlightenment
common
common
history,
history
and
going back hundreds of
we
years.
share values, or we share
Yeah.
values with a lot of Americans. Um, so what I'm trying to say here is that the feeling in Europe is probably that how can it be that America can change so much in such a short time? And I think there's even a little bit of fear from, let's say, 80% of the Europeans or 70% of the Europeans. I mean, let's say the center and little left-leanist would say, how could this happen? How can it be that the U.S. administration can change U.S. foreign and security and defense politics so much? The U.S. defense and security strategy, which was published very recently, I mean, essentially is hybrid war against Europe. I mean, it's and we have seen the U.S. vice president supporting Orban right in the face of the Europeans coming here, talking about that it's so it's such an ambiguity.
Yeah, I think
We
that
like
defense.
we like America, we
Hmm.
like Americans, but there are just something which is happening which is very difficult to understand.
Yeah, I just was going to interject quickly. That defense strategy paper, I think, was the first time that, you know, the US criticized Europe for immigration policies, things that weren't
Yeah,
even really traditionally, and it did
yeah,
defense related, and it didn't
yeah.
really say
Yeah.
anything about Russia's invasion of
No,
Ukraine at all,
I mean,
which is
when
interesting.
the United States in the United Nations votes with China, Russia, and North Korea
Yeah.
against something related to Ukraine,
Hmm.
we sit saying, "What? What is happening? What has happened?" And I want no, I don't want to give you that one. I was just saying that moral and ethics have changed, and that is very difficult to understand. So, what is the feeling in Europe towards America? I think it's very positive towards a lot of Americans, but very concerned with the present administration and what it has said, threats against NATO, the economic policies, the tariffs, and so on and so on, because we don't see it as productive and we see it as dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now
I
we
would
don't
say,
know how. Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead, please.
No, we don't know how much America is actually helping Ukraine. I mean, what's happening behind the screen, we don't know intelligence wise, targeting and all that stuff. We don't know. It could be more than we think. But at least the support on material, on munitions, on it's essentially not there anymore.
Yeah, and from the messaging, I mean, you can surmise, I mean, from what JD Vance has said, I think there was a quote I saw recently where he said he was very proud of the fact that the US wasn't supporting Ukraine anymore, or,
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, that was just
yeah,
like very clearly saying he didn't
yeah.
support
So,
a democratic
so
country that had been
yeah,
invaded by undemocratic Russia, so which says
yeah.
it all, basically.
And you could say to some degree, I mean, and as a political statement in the United States, why should Americans help somewhere over in Europe? The Europeans can do it themselves. And you could say partly that is right. However, I mean, again, the world is the world today, and it's just this little ball in the middle of space,
Hank.
as we just saw from this wonderful mission that was just executed to the back of the moon, and at the Artemis 2. And what I was trying to say is that the United States would they have declared this Dunroe doctrine that we will care about our part of the world and we will dominate that and we will take that and we will be the power there. And then the next thing is we have a feeling that, well, then the Russians can do what they want to do in their part of the world and Chinese can do what they want to do in their part of the world. And it's all about the bigger powers and their interests. Then
Yeah.
you start having you have the old saying, you are at the table or on the table. Uh, you sit at the table with the others and eat what's on the table. And therefore we probably have a feeling that if this continues, we might be on the table and not at the table.
Hmm.
And I think we're slightly concerned about that. So the feelings about America is really ambiguous because it's on the one side the long history together, all what we have done together, our common cultural and democratic or whatever you want to call it, Western background, and on the other hand, reactions to what is happening. I mean, you start seeing that people travel less to the United States and so on and so on, which is concerning.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah,
I mean, because as a longtime Europhile, I've lived in England for 2 years, and just my wife and I both just love Europe to death. So the
yeah,
culture
yeah,
and the history,
yeah,
and it's painful to see the relations take such
yeah,
a sharp turn downward like this.
yeah.
So
So, and personally, I mean, I told you I'm married to an American. I have my family there, and I mean, I've tried to explain that even within friends and family, that the political discourse in America is also influencing even by the dinner table.
mm,
What can you say and what can you not say? And I mean, it's becoming personal to me, to my family, it hurts every day.
Yeah, it's happening here too as well. I've noticed in our society, there's a lot more tension that didn't exist before
Yeah,
because obviously Trump has divided the society and radicalized the politics. So you're seeing, and hopefully this can be reversed. We,
yeah,
I pray that it doesn't go further and further
yeah,
because that's a really, really could become problematic. But I have seen things in my lifetime. Politics used to be relegated off to the side, and people didn't
yeah.
really, they'd vote and keep up on issues but it wasn't as all consuming as it is now. Whereas people are
And,
drawing battle lines and people are actually getting angry at each other, family members, friends, things of that nature. So that's,
and,
yeah, where we're at here in the States.
and I mean that is concerning, and I agree with your prayers that hopefully this is a period of time where and then there is a comeback to more values and to speaking nicely and and well together. I just wanted to mention one more thing that we
Sure.
did this no words manifestation in Copenhagen.
I wanted to ask you about that. So I'm glad. Yeah, I wanted to make sure we covered, yeah, that you
Yeah.
talked because you were instrumental in organizing that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we sat four persons, and then we heard the speech from Davos on including Greenland. But first of all, it started. It was where the president spoke about the NATO allies and their efforts in I think this was mainly Afghanistan, but to us it meant Iraq and Afghanistan, and that we were on the back and we were not in the front line and we didn't come willingly and so on and so on. And we heard that, and then we actually said, well, we are speechless. And therefore there's no words came. So and we sat down on a I think on a Saturday or something and wrote a short manifest. We didn't call it a demonstration, but a manifestation, and saying we are obviously offended by this despicable speaking about the NATO allies and that, and I mean we have seen Danish soldiers and Dutch, British, others really on the front line. We have seen it, and we know it, and we have lost soldiers out there. We thought this was disrespectful, and
Hmm.
again the next question was why do this? Why was this necessary? And therefore we protested against this, and we clearly voiced our anger of this betrayal against us as veterans, but also our nations.
Mm.
That and the fact that we came immediately when asked was neglected, forgotten.
Right.
So, so this rewriting of history, which kind of is very famous in Russia, not least. We are not used to see that being coming out of Washington, and we thought this is too much, so we wanted to react to that, and but we
Can I
also
can I ask
wanted,
can I ask you at this point was also because I know the quote J.D. Vance had said that the Danes hadn't been very good allies. Had he
yeah,
said that at this point?
that was a year before.
Okay, because when I read that,
Yeah.
it just must have made the veterans' blood
It,
boil. I
it,
mean, I can't
that
imagine.
was that was already a year ago. That was in March last year,
I can't
and we
imagine.
reacted to that. But then you could say that was entirely linked to Greenland, that we had not been a good ally, and so on and so on.
Hmm.
And whereas a year later, it was clearly linked to Afghanistan and Iraq. And I mean
Mm.
that is where the blood started boiling.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to say this very clearly, and we wanted to state this to official America. So therefore, we walked from the national monument where we honored our dead colleagues, and then we marched on to in all silence to the U.S. embassy where we stated this. And the other thing is we wanted to support and make very very clear that we support Greenland, we support Faroe Islands, we support Denmark. All three countries in the Kingdom of Denmark. It sounds strange, a little strange construction, but that's the construction, and that is the Kingdom of Denmark. And we, as veterans, we represent all three countries, all three entities of the kingdom.
Mm.
But we also already on that day, on the very first day of this whole no words, already on the third day, had a third leg to our manifestation, which was we want to support the US veterans. We want to support all those ones, and as we started out by talking about, saying that we admired, that we felt good with, that we felt we had fought for the same values. We want to support them. We want to make sure that they know that we appreciated what they did. And if I cannot say or could not underline, I cannot underline enough how much we support American veterans and all they have sacrificed. Because I know a lot of American veterans, including in my own family, have sacrificed a lot in the fight against terror and other places in the world, obviously, and in other wars throughout history. And I only want to say thank you very much for that sacrifice and for those sacrifices. We highly respect that, and we wanted to demonstrate that.
Well, those are very well put words, and I appreciate it. And I think what you're describing is the bond that is formed amongst men in battle,
Yeah.
regardless of nationality, who are fighting and dying together. And that's
Yeah.
why I felt very strongly going into this that the veterans have a very special role to play here to fight against this and to fight for kind of, you know, to fight for what's right in this whole situation. So right back at you. I mean, I served with the Danish forces out in Iraq, and that's like for me primary motivation for me because I saw what they were doing out there, and I can only imagine the slap in the face that they must feel to turn around several years later and have the president of the United States saying that he's gonna just, treat their country like dirt. It just doesn't sit well with veterans who have served together overseas.
No, it
Um,
doesn't.
Not at all. Um, so yeah, I applaud you for organizing those protests. I hope we'll see what happens. I guess we're just gonna have to sit and wait and see. Maybe this will just kind of continue to just be a low boil, kind of trickle along, and it won't be an issue. But you never know.
Yeah.
Um, but from my perspective, I'd like to keep up the conversation. If there's any other developments,
Yeah.
maybe we can organize in a some kind of a better way to get more veterans involved in this issue,
Yeah.
do what we can to push back and fight for what's right. And what I want to say to you is I want to get to the day someday where you can take your Bronze Star out of the closet and put it back on your
Yeah.
wall.
Thank
That's what
you.
I'm fighting for.
Well, I thank you, and it will come out one day, I'm sure. But
I hope so.
I on the day that Vance stated in March last year that Denmark was not a good ally, I ran down the stairs in my house. I had gotten, like you have in on your shelf behind you, the triangle with the stars and stripes. I had gotten that with an appreciation and the flag that had been hoisted in the face of the enemy and waved over our camp in the face of the enemy. And we had this flag in the most predominant place in the house, in the hall. I was proud of that. I got it from the commanding officer of the mission. I had gotten the Bronze Star from the US ambassador in Copenhagen. I was dead proud of these things. We showed them to everyone who entered our house.
Mm.
But on the day that it, I I ran down the stairs and I took it down and I cried and said to my wife and said in a loud voice, "It's over, it's gone." She said, "What? What is over? What is gone?" I said, "Well, the flag." And I put it away. but it is right behind me, ready to come out.
Okay.
This
Well,
is
I
not
hope
against America. It's against authoritarians and those who speak badly about my country and my veteran colleagues.
yeah, and I understand. I cannot imagine. I mean, as a veteran, like those things mean the most to you, and to
Yeah,
have someone say something like that is just
yeah,
unbelievable. But
yeah.
um, listen, Soren, it's been great talking to you. I assure you that we're going to continue to work. We're on your side. There's a lot of veterans. There are many,
Thank you.
many people in America who feel the same way as I do. A lot of veterans, and what all we can do is continue to get the word out. And again, this issue's kind of gone away a little bit for now, but I'm not ready to let it. I'm not going to stop.
Well,
I'm going to keep it on the radar and make sure we keep
thank you.
raising awareness because we need to get back to some basics here that we've and not nothing on your country. This is my country that we need to work on here. So
Yeah.
maybe we can keep working together and pushing
Well,
for
I'd,
um,
I'd, I'd be ready.
pushing for what's right, for doing the
Yes.
right thing.
It's in a world where values are being perceived by many as less of a motivation and less of power,
Mm,
and where interests, even personal interests, have become much more important. In that sense, those of us who are still fighting for the values need to be together.
agree,
And that's
100%. 100%. Thank you so much for coming on today.
thank you.
So this is Søren Knudsen, retired colonel in the Danish Army. He's the current deputy president of the Danish Veterans Association. He's been very active in pushing back against the Trump administration's attempt to annex Greenland. Soren, I hope to talk to you again in the future, and hopefully it won't. Hopefully we can. It won't be like it was earlier this year. Well, I would hate to see this issue comes back, but if it does, we're just going to have to do what we can do to deal with it. But I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank
See
you,
you.
Soren.
Thank you.